verses are key. It shows Esther is crowned. 4:13 and 14, Esther is crisis. And 8:16 and 17, Rick, can you read that, please?
The Jews had light and gladness and joy and honor, and in every province, in every city, wherever the king's commandment and his decree came, the Jews had joy and gladness, a feast and a good day. And many of the people of the land became Jews, for the fear of the Jews fell upon them.
So it is key because Jews gained recognition and proselytes.
What was the last word?
Proselytes? Converts. That's good. So Esther's crowned, Esther's crisis, Esther's converts. Okay. Key chapters. So we look at it. Pulling back, key chapter is chapter 4, because here is Esther's crisis. It shows the total providence of God. Who knoweth whether thou art come to the kingdom for such a time as this? Verse 14. And then chapter 8 is key, because it's the Jews' crisis.
What's the verse 8?
No, I didn't give any. But you have the joy because the decree is reversed. Just like for how can I see verse 6, how can I endure to see the evil that shall come unto my people? How can I endure to see the destruction of my kindred? Right before that time, there was no hope. Before the decree. The message of the book of Esther by Van Doren, he summed up by saying, God is still on the throne and is not unmindful of his own, which declares the providential care. Even though we know that nowhere in the book of Esther, as we're going to see, is there any reference to God. Not any reference to God. But yet God is still in control. And there's a reason for that. It becomes really interesting when we look at it. Historical purpose of the book, to give the historical foundation for the origin and celebration of the Feast of Purim. Esther 7. Which deals with the deliverance when Haman is hanged, and of course the decree. Also doctrinal purpose, the providential care of God for his own. Similar to Luke 14. I'll read that. In Romans 8:28, as we know, all things work together for good for those who are called according to his purpose. And Luke 14:11, which you probably know, but I don't think we could quote. For whosoever shall exalt himself shall be abased. Yeah, we could quote that. And he that humble himself shall be exalted. So those two principles come into play. It's actually an outworking, almost a parable, as it were, of those two things. But it's not a parable, it's a true story. Christological purpose, God has not forgotten the Jews who did not return. Actually kind of showing that here they didn't want to leave the comforts of being when they're set up in the Persian Median Empire. Here they were told, because remember, to them that's pioneering. They weren't going back to a place that was already established. They had to pioneer again. Everything had been destroyed and been down for how many years? 70 years. And so it was going back pioneering. And so these Jews who decided to stay behind, God still hadn't forgotten them. They were trying to forget God, in a sense. Esther, whose name means star, is a beautiful picture of Christ, the bright and morning star. Both put themselves in a place of death for their people. or received the scepter of the king's approval. Chapter 5, verse 1. And the king sat upon his royal throne in the royal house over against the gate. I don't think that's F. That's supposed to be. Verse 2. And the king held out to Esther the golden scepter that was in his hand. So Esther drew near and touched the top of the scepter.
What's that reference?
5:2. Outlines of the book of Esther. Baxter has chapters 1 to 5 are crisis and anticipation, or the crisis anticipated. The Jews are going to be killed. Chapters 6 to 10, crisis overruled. Unger has it chapters 1 to 3, danger of the Jews, and 4 to 10, deliverance. So he breaks it off earlier from chapter 3 because this is the intent of Haman. From there on, you start seeing the providence of God and the foreplay, why Esther was probably there at that time, and how it's brought forth and deliverance is realized. Phillips breaks down from 1 to 3, 4 and 5, and 6 to 10. So he kind of includes both of them together. 1 to 3, how the plot was formed. Chapter 1, the might of Ahasuerus. Half of 2 says the marriage of Esther. The other half of 2 is the ministry of Mordecai. And 3 is the malice of Haman. 4 and 5 is how the plot was fought. First part of 4 is the cry of Israel. The next part of 4 should be 4 to 14. The convictions of Mordecai. 15 to 5:8 is the courage of Esther. 5:9 to 14 is the confidence of Haman. And finally, last part is 6 to 10, how the plot was foiled. So how the plot was formed, how the plot was fought, and then how the plot was foiled. Chapters 6 to 7 is the death of Haman. He was publicly humbled. And 7, he was publicly hanged. Also, so the death of Haman, the decree of Ahasuerus to save the Jews, the actual deliverance of the people of Israel. 9, and the rest of 9 is the day of Purim, and 10, the dignity of Mordecai.
When we learn this, you'll know the reference.
Again, yeah, always reference, and Roman numeral and capital alphabet. At least the yeah, you wouldn't have to remember. I'd say at least just the Roman numeral then. Yeah, give you a break. Schofield has it into 3 divisions. His is a little bit different. He focuses first on just Esther. Chapter 1 and actually 2:18 is Esther's chosen queen. 2:19 to 7:10, Esther delivers her people, and 8:1 to 10, Jews revenge upon their enemies. It's a little bit too broad, I think, but Van Duren has made 2 of them. One was 1 to 4 is the Jews in great danger. 5 to 10, the Jews experience great deliverance, focusing on the Jews. Whereas he made another one focusing on the feasts. Chapters 1 to 2, the feast of Ahasuerus. 3 to 7, the feast of Esther. Remember, she kept having these feasts and invited him over and for the quest, and then the one with Haman. And 8 to 10, the feast of Purim. So that was an interesting way of looking at it, the different feasts. Relation of the book to the rest of Scripture. Ezra and Nehemiah emphasize the Jews have returned to the land. Esther, the Jews that didn't return to the land. So you get a whole, at that historical time period, you get exactly what's going on pretty well. Jews that returned, what's happening. The Jews that didn't return, what happened. Their main crisis, that is. It's never mentioned or alluded to in the New Testament, the book of Esther. Never mentioned, never quoted. Psalms 11, especially, and Isaiah 54:17 form a good commentary. Who's last read? It doesn't matter, I guess. I'll read Psalm 11. And Tracy, can you look up Isaiah 54:17? Psalm 11 says, "In the Lord put I my trust. How say ye to my soul, flee as a bird to your mountain? For lo, the wicked bend their bow, they make ready their arrows upon the string, that they may privily shoot at the upright in heart. If the foundations be destroyed, what can the righteous do? The Lord is in his holy temple, the Lord's throne is in heaven. His eyes behold, his eyelids try the children of men. The Lord trieth the righteous, but the wicked and him that loveth violence his soul hateth. Upon the wicked he shall rain snares, fire and brimstone, and a horrible tempest. This shall be the portion of their cup. For the righteous Lord loveth righteousness, his countenance doth behold the upright." And Isaiah 54:17.
"The weapon that is formed against thee shall prosper, and every tongue that shall rise against thee in judgment thou shalt condemn. This is the heritage of the servants of the Lord, and their righteousness is from me, saith the Lord."
Okay. So, it's just a commentary, basically. The Lord's on his throne, even though they don't mention him, and again, we'll come to the reason why. He's not mentioning that. You see his hand. He is faithful, even when those who are called his own aren't. Notes of special interest, like I've mentioned so many times now, no reference of God in the book of Esther. And that's not the only thing, too. But 187 times there's a reference to Ahasuerus, the Persian king. 187 times. So it really focuses. Makes no reference to prayer or the observance of the Jewish law or Palestine or the temple or even general Hebrew history. The closest it comes to anything like that is the fast, which seemed, a lot of it's by insinuation. It seems to insinuate this is what they're doing. Insinuate, they realize, Mordecai, when he says in 4:14, that for this reason you had been set up. I'm not going to paraphrase it. I'll read it for you. "Who knoweth whether thou art come to the kingdom for such a time as this?" So again, insinuates divine control. Also, we already mentioned it's not quoted in the New Testament. Rabbis of old quoted Deuteronomy 31:18 to explain why God is not mentioned. Deuteronomy 31, verse 18 says, "And I will surely hide my face in that day for all the evils which they shall have wrought, and that they are turned to other gods." And what they're basically saying is, the people, God's not mentioned, and he's made it inspired not to be mentioned, because though he shows his providence, these people still will not separate themselves. They willfully chose, even though before they could have went by the decree of Cyrus, they could have went to the land. They chose the comforts of where they were living over the Lord. Just showing they had excluded them out of him, out of their life, not being Lord life, so that he's excluded out of the book, yet not his care is still there. He hasn't cut them off. To keep faithful to his word. But something that's interesting to note is God's name does appear in acrostic form, which means the first letter or the last letter of each word. You look at it and it spells his name. Now, not so much in English, though an example will be given, but the tetragrammaton, which means the four-lettered word, which means Yahweh. Okay. 4 instances total. 2 times it's the first letter, and 2 times it's the last letter. Now, in some ways, this is an interesting point. I mean, some people would say this is spiritual gymnastics, doing flipping here and doing this and all this kind of stuff. But it is interesting that hidden within it, I mean, you don't have to play it backwards on a tape or anything, but hidden within it is the word God, using letters. And there's some reasons why they conclude this is there, but showing also God is hidden in the works. Even though people are excluded, they chose to stay there, He is still manifested.
So you see that in the original text, but you don't see it in the English text.
No, but this Scroggie gave a interesting thing where a guy kind of paraphrased the verses and showed how it can be done. So he gave the same meaning of the verse, he paraphrased it, and then did the first letter so the English way could be done. So he's getting an idea how it was in the Hebrew. See, frontwards for Jews and backwards for Gentiles. That's why in each verse, the ones that go frontwards is when it was made reference to the Jews. When it goes backwards in the name, the Hebrew acrostic was when it made reference to Gentiles. So, and the specific verses are 120, 5:4, 5:13, and 7:7. And 120, it and all wives shall give. That in the Hebrew spells out Yahweh, the letters. 5:13, 7:7, and 5:4. Let come the king and Haman this day. Or the other way. So, an example, 120, if you turn there. Bev, can you read that, please? 120.
This is Esther 1:20.
Mm-hmm.
Then when the king's edict is proclaimed throughout all his vast realm, all the women will respect their husbands from the least to the greatest.
Okay. Now the paraphrase that he put to give this idea how it was, if you look in the original, it's the first initial or the last. It says, "Now do respect our ladies, all shall give their husbands." So he just paraphrased it, and you notice the first letter of each word, right? The D-R-O-L, well, spell it backwards, L-O-R-D. Now he just did it in English to show you how it was done in the Hebrew. 5:4. Blair?
And Esther answered, "If it seems good to the king, let the king and Haman come this day unto the banquet that I have prepared for him."
Okay, and so he paraphrased it again to get the point across. Let our royal dinner bring Haman, right? Because that's what the thing's about. And again, if you the first letter of each one, it's written frontwards, L-O-R-D. 5:13. Read that, please, Rick.
Yet all this availeth me nothing, as long as I see Mordecai, the Jew, sitting at the king's gate.
Okay, and so paraphrase is grand, for no avail, my state, while this Jew sits at the gate. You know, a poem out of it, no less. But the G-F, I'm sorry, the last letter now. The D, the R, the O, the L of each word, the last letter. And is Lord backwards.
Is that what it says? Is that the way it says it in the Hebrew Bible?
I don't know. I didn't look at it. Oh yeah, this is not a translation, I don't think. I think it's a paraphrase. And he made a rhyme out of it. But it's showing, this is the way I think it appears. Like if you look at this verse, I think it goes backwards of the first letter of each Hebrew word. I think he just did it the same way to show you. The next verse is frontwards of the first letter of each word in the Hebrew. 5:13 is backwards of the last letter of each Hebrew word. And 7:7 will be backwards the last letter of each word. I mean frontwards the last letter of each word. And 7:7 is and the king, arising from the banquet of wine in his wrath, went into the palace garden. And Haman stood up to make request for his life to Esther the queen, for he saw that there was evil determined against him by the king. Well, ill to fear decree I find toward me in the monarch's mind. See, he just made a poem out of it, but the main point is the last letter of each word going forward is Lord. So, and of course, that's the human thing, Lord, 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 but it's Yahweh. And so it's a little bit of it's an interesting point. I mean, I wouldn't base a theological doctrine on it, but it's interesting that this is found in there. And it seems each one of these is key points in the book. Like they're key sections too. So it just seems a little bit more than coincidence that these are there. But like again, I wouldn't base anything on it. December 14th and 15th, and this is what is even celebrated even today. Right? December 14th, 15th were set aside as national Jewish holidays. This was called the Feast of Purim, from the word pure, meaning lots, or pure lot, and an im is plural. Pure im, lots. Haman had cast lots to determine the day on which to destroy the Jews. No, Purim is instituted. Verse 20, but I don't see it as being chapter 9, because he's already dead. Remember that one verse that we read? When he's sitting at the gate? Yeah. No. Oh, 5:13? No. No, there's a... Oh, I'll find later, I'll have to tell you.
9:26?
Yeah, that gives the institution, but therefore they call these days Purim, after the name pure, which is lot, therefore all the words. But actually talking about the lot. There it is. 9:24. Because Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agite, the enemy of all Jews, had devised against the Jews to destroy them, and had cast pure, or lot, that is the lot, to consume them and destroy them. I think it goes back, it just knows cross-reference 3:6. There it is, yeah. 3:7 goes right back to, in the first month, that is the month of Nisan, which is interesting. It's the month of Nisan, which is the same month. The 14th of Nisan is when the Passover is killed, is what we celebrate Easter. Easter is the 14th of Nisan, the Passover. And the first month, and it's interesting, is Jewish reckoning, because by the Jewish calendar, that's the first month. By a Roman calendar, that's about the 4th or 5th, depending on which way the moon is. In the 12th year of King Ahasuerus, they cast pure, that is, the lot, before Haman from day to day, from month to month, to 12. So you see him actually doing stuff, and he uses lot. It's like rolling dice almost. He uses this lot to determine when he's going to kill the Jews. And so that's why they call Purim, because the lots were cast and it was in their favor in a sense. So I'm going to record that down myself. It's 9. Yeah, 9:24 with C reference 3:7. Also, this interesting point that this was already celebrated after this, just like this decree that Mordecai sends out. The Feast of Purim is first mentioned in Maccabees. Now, Maccabees, again, is not an inspired book. It's just a historical book, so it's not 100% accurate. But even by that time, Maccabees was written in about 200 BC. So even by then, they're already celebrating Purim. So it shows again, this book cannot have been written about 200 or so. Remember their claim, the liberals claim that, oh, this was written about 200 to explain why they celebrate Purim. Like they made it, prefabricated it, and made up a myth about it. But it's already a fact. Ruth, and this is an interesting point, Ruth was a Gentile woman who married a Jew, Boaz. Esther was a Jewish woman who married a Gentile. And so it's kind of interesting. Even the periods, Ruth is just before where they come into the land, and the Gentile getting grace through the Jewish thing. Now finally showing that the end of it, and the decline of the thing, here's the Jews marrying into the Gentiles, which they weren't supposed to do. There's 167 verses in Esther, containing 5,637 words. 5,637. Remember, we gotta remember these for the test, eh?
What was the verses?
What's that?
How many verses did you say?
167. Yeah, this is the King James. You'll find a little bit differences in word count in that. Now, things concerning Christ in the book, or even spiritual things, but the Jews in Persia, these Jews that remained behind, they had the freedom to go, are believers in the world, to find the nation as a whole in history. And also, I would say even those believers who, instead of battling on the front, who have given up to the world. And yet the Lord is still looking after them. We could think of people who in their spiritual walk have become worldly, and the Lord still loves them just as much. You can never, no matter what you do or don't do, you can never increase or decrease the love of God towards you. But He still has His hand in their life. And even though they'll make no mention of Him, and just as it was in the book of Esther, He's still there, still caring for them, He's still faithful. Haman is a kind of a type of the Antichrist, out to destroy the Jews. And we know him as the adversary, the roaring lion, going about seeking whom he may devour. Esther can be typed as two things. One is the church, and also maybe more a type of Christ. She would be obedient unto death. She was willing to give up her life. She was an intercessor for the people in that position before the king, and afterwards exalted. Mordecai, a kind of picture of the faithful Jew remnant, and how he's exalted also. And ultimately the Lord is symbolized as the advocate of His people through the book of Esther. So that's our synthesis of the book of Esther.
Now, when we went to start,
Just backtracking a bit before we go on to the introduction to the poetical books. In Esther, we had some key words, and I didn't give what the numbers to you yesterday. So letter F, key words, key to the book. Number 1, key words. Decree is mentioned 13 times.
whoa, are we back to yesterday?
Yeah, Esther. Second page of Esther. Okay. So decree, that's 13 times that word is mentioned. An example is chapter 1, verse 20. Which states, and when the king's decree which he shall make shall be published. So decree. Also that goes along with it is commanded or command, which is again showing the authority of the king. We saw just how often it was mentioned, how much he himself is mentioned. But commanded is mentioned 25 times in Esther. An example is 1:10. On the 7th day, when the heart of the king was merry with wine, he commanded so and so and such and such.
Did you say 17?
1:10.
No, did you say 17 times?
25. And petition is 6 times, which again is the other part of it, making her petition before him. 5:6. And the king said unto Esther at the banquet of wine, what is thy petition? And also the same verse could be used as for the next line, petition, also request is mentioned 9 times. It's a word that's not there, so if you write it in beside petition, it's the same idea, petition or request, decree and command. So for petition is 6 times, request is 9 times. And again, another example is 5:6. What is thy petition? It shall be granted thee. What is thy request? So total of that kind of idea is 15 times, and the other is 38 times. The key phrases which you had there, we listed chapter 5 verse 3 and 6 for what is thy petition, and it shall be granted thee. 7 verse 2 and 9 verse 12, it's 6 times that phrase comes up. with petition. And a good day. The Bob and Doug Mackenzie. 3 times that it was a good day for the Jews. So continuing on, if you'll turn now to your notes on the introduction to the poetical books. Maybe you have the chart before you, just for your interest, biblical bookshelf that was in Geisler. You see how they fit together. All the books. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy is one section. Job coming in to the chapters of Genesis chronologically for content. Joshua and Judges and Ruth being together and following. A bit of a gap in the history. Then 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings, and 1st Chronicles covering 1st and 2nd Samuel, 2nd Chronicles covering 1st and 2nd Kings. In the last part of the 2nd Kings, you have, as it's noted above, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Hosea, Joel, Amos, Obadiah, Jonah, Micah, Nahum, Habakkuk, Zephaniah. Then during the 70 years exile, or the Psalms of David during 2nd Samuel, when he reigned, Song of Solomon, Proverbs, and Ecclesiastes during 1st Kings, when it takes up with Solomon. Then Lamentations, Ezekiel, and Daniel during the 7-year exile. So they're just during that period. Then it starts with Ezra, Esther, and Nehemiah, because Esther fits in. Actually, that book should be open. It fits in between chapters 6 and 7 of Ezra. There's a little gap there. Then comes Esther. Then Nehemiah closes off. Malachi goes with Nehemiah. He was the prophet ministering at the time. And Haggai and Zechariah go with Ezra. So that's pretty well. Just a biblical bookshelf and a chart that kind of shows how they all fit together chronologically. So introduction to the poetical books. The date of writing, just like it's on this chart, I just recorded, there are 3 primary periods of poetic literature. The patriarchal period, that's where Job is. So you have poetry in that area, around 2000 BC. The Davidic period, which the Psalms covers, through Samuel and that. And the Solomonic period. We have the Song of Solomon. And it's interesting to note, Song of Solomon was young man's love. So it's probably done early in Solomon's life. Proverbs is a middle-aged man's wisdom when he's at the height of his kingdom. And Ecclesiastes is an old man's sorrow. It's when he becomes skeptical. He is already apostatized in a sense, been led away by his wise gods to worship them. And it become a skeptic, almost too wise for his own good. And has forgotten that all is vanity without the Lord, which he summarizes at the first and last of that book. So it covers basically from the patriarchal period right up to the Solomonic period. Now, as for the specific books, now there's, as we're going to see, there's poetry throughout the whole Old Testament. There's sections of poetry and things like this, but books that are mainly classified like that. Classification of Old Testament poetry. To the Hebrews, wisdom was constituted by skill in living. That's why they consider Job a wisdom book, if you look in the Hebrew Bible, because it was a skill in living, how to deal with sorrow, how to deal with calamity in life, even though it itself, in the way it's written, is poetry by Hebrew standard, but it's because of what it's talking about. That combined with the powers of observation, the capacities of human intellect, and the application of knowledge and experience to daily life. That's what the Hebrews meant by wisdom. Those things. English poetry depends largely for its effect upon recurrence of sound, like I pointed out yesterday. Mind, time, where they rhyme like that. We look for recurrence of sound. But the majority of Hebrew poetry cultivates the recurrence of thought. And we're going to go through that right now. In fact, there's 3 rhythms. They have rhythm of thought, which is the main one. Rhythm of form, I think it is. I can't remember my rhythm of sound. We'll look at, and then rhythm of form. So rhythm of thought, it says the value of parallelism lies in its simplicity and translatability. It's simple to do, to make it parallel. Like, it's a lot harder to think of mind and time, except when you get to acrostics, of course. It's harder to rhyme and make your point still get across without butchering it too much to make it rhyme in the English. Whereas in the Hebrew, because it doesn't have to rhyme, it's a lot easier with thought to get expressions across, so you don't lose them, and it's also valuable in translatability. When you translate it and you look in here, you don't lose the thought because it's never rhymed by the sound anyways. Most of the time it's by the thought, so when you translate it, you don't lose it, which is the problem with any other language in the way we think of rhyme, rhythm. We're going to notice that there's 4 major parallelisms, and one of them has a division of 2, and we'll look at that. There's synonymous parallelism. This type of poetry, the second half of the verse repeats the content of the first half, only in different words, and we have some examples. Psalm 2:4, he that sitteth in the heavens shall laugh, the Lord, going to he, paralleling he, shall have them in derision. Or, deliver me, O Lord, from the evil man, preserve me. So deliver me, preserve me from the violent man, evil man. See how it parallels? So to show emphasis, to show that the rhythm of thought coming through, that it's synonymous. Hear this, all you peoples. Or listen, so he's paralleling, hear this, all who live in this world. So all you people are all who live in this world. Or when the morning starts, I don't think that's right, Job 38:7. When the morning stars, I thought so. Yeah. When the morning stars sang together, and all the sons of God shouted for joy. So shouted for joy, sang together, and it's interesting because by this you can see sometimes what they paralleled it to. They paralleled the morning stars to the sons of God. And again, this will be used later on. You look at Genesis 6 or things like this. Who were the sons of God, or what does Scripture give them to? And during the patriarchal period, they saw them as angels. Another descriptive term for them. So, synonymous parallelism. And you see how that works. Okay, that's one form of poetry to the Hebrews. Another form was antithetical parallelism. In this type of arrangement, a thought is stated in the first verse only to be set out in contrast, or antithesis in the second, like this. So in other words, it's the opposite. The first, you made it similar in the second verse, the same thought. This type of poetry, you make it just the opposite. The young lions do lack and suffer hunger, but they that seek the Lord shall not want any good thing. So here's one, it's hungry, even those that could provide for themselves, and they're hungry, unable to meet their need. But they that seek the Lord shall not want any good thing, totally provided for. Or, a righteous man regardeth the life of his beast, but the tender mercies of the wicked are cruel. Or another one, for the Lord watches over the way of the righteous, but the way of the wicked will perish. Again, contrast. Righteousness exalts a nation, but sin is a reproach to any people. Again, the contrast, what righteousness will do and sin. Another type of parallelism is exemplar or emblematic, meaning an emblem or an example parallelism. So you have synonymous parallelism, where the 2 verses, they say the exact same thing, just in different words. And antithetical symbolism, they try to get one point across by saying the opposite, showing the contrast, to really bring out the one point. Usually referring to the Lord and His provision, so you show what doesn't provide, or trusting the Lord compared to what happens when you don't trust. Exemplar or emblematic is going to show an example, or be an emblem. It's going to be more descriptive. It says the second or succeeding lines give a figurative illustration of the first. Give some other ones you could look up. Or one line is metaphorically illustrates the literal truth of the other, whether first or second. Just basically one line gives a picture, a word picture, that you can get a mental image, so you can fit in the truth of it. Iron sharpens iron. So there's the picture. you can almost picture two swords going like this. So it gives you a word picture. Right. Yeah, so it gives you a word picture. That's the purpose of this. Then it says, and one man sharpens another. So you get an idea how then you can draw so many truths from that. Because a picture is worth 1,000 words, how the rubbing together sharpens, but yet there's the friction. And you can go on drawing the truths out just from that one word picture. And it's to heighten it. Another one, a continual dripping on a raining day. I just stopped there. So it's dip, dip. Old Chinese torture, you know. And a contentious woman are alike. Nag, nag, nag. Well, this is scripture. By Proverbs, the middle-aged man, a lot of wisdom, 1,000 wives.
Yeah, he knew what he was talking about.
So, exemplar or emblematic parallelism. And the last major type is synthetic parallelism. In this type of poem, a thought is given and then expanded in the succeeding lines, each line building on the first as follows. So precept upon precept. It goes step by step as it builds up the thought. And he shall be like a tree planted by the rivers of water. So here you got a tree planted. And then it says, that bringeth forth his fruit in his season. So now it's growing, right? It's planted, now it's bringing forth fruit, it's growing. His leaf also shall not wither. So now it's coming the next season, the fall. And whichever do shall prosper. So it's just growing. Like it's building precept upon precept. Her wisdom hath builded her houses. She hath hewn out her 7 pillars. She hath killed her beast. She hath mingled her wine. She hath also furnished her table. So I went from the big picture right down to the small. By building. Another one, above all else, guard your heart, for it is the wellspring of life. I wouldn't say that was one. That sounds more like exemplar or emblematic, right? The wellspring of life. So guard your heart. Ascribe to the Lord, Almighty ones. Ascribe to the Lord glory and strength. Ascribe to the Lord glory due His name. So see how it's building? First, ascribe to Him mighty ones, those who have their own glory, right? Ascribe to Him glory and strength. Ascribe to Him glory due to His name. So it's building. Worship the Lord in splendor of His holiness. In the ultimate. Now, synthetic parallelism appears in various forms. Okay, introversion and alternation can be traced, and we're going to look at some examples. Introverted parallelism, next page, a section from Psalm 35. If we can just read that. Tracy, could you read that, please? Psalm 35, verses 15 to 18. And in some versions and some Bibles, what they've done is they've actually, people that are Hebrew scholars and have gone through and know the poetry, they've actually put it in poetic form. And that's how they're translated. This is not the translation. This is giving the outline of the verses, but they show you how they're constructed. Yeah, 135. I'm sorry, did I say 35? 135, verse 15 to 18.
Of the nations are silver and gold, the work of men's hands. They have mouths, but they speak not. Eyes but they see not. They have ears, but they hear not. Neither is there any breath in their mouths. They that make them are like unto them. So is every one of us that trusteth in them.
Okay. So it's interesting, and just watching this, and you can see why this is like a form of poetry. It takes thought to do this, to construct it like this. You start off, the idols themselves, right? Built on it, and looked at their fabrication. Verse 15, it was our silver and gold, the works of men's hands. Then it goes closer and says they have mouths, but speak not. So mouths without speech, the singular. Then eyes have they, but see not. And you can see eyes, so it's mouth, eyes. Then ears have ears, but they hear not. And it goes out again. It parallels. It's going